Check 1 2 1 2. Ooh. All right, guys. Whoop. I won't scream into the mic, I promise. We're just about to start. Welcome for coming. As you can tell, I'm not from Scotland. I'm a Geordie. But we're here to celebrate a year on from the independence. Celebrate, commiserate, whichever side you're on. So we're going to get started. Just a caveat to begin with. The Conservative Party and the UKIP Party couldn't make it, and nor could the Liberal Democrats. For better or for worse, they were invited, but they're small, and it was very last minute. We only found out 2 weeks ago, so we put this together. So we thank you for coming, and yeah, enjoy it. We're going to have a few rounds of questions amongst the panelists, who we'll introduce in a second, and then we'll go to a bit of Q&A between us and the audience. So right, let's get started. I'll hand over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Tom. So yes, welcome. Wonderful to see. Well, no, I can't say that it was wonderful to hear a round of applause that UKIP weren't there because I have to be politically neutral tonight. Sorry? Something you want to share? No?
My hair looks incredible.
Good, excellent. We'll take that on board. We all in agreement? Her hair looks great. Excellent, good. Well, we're off to a flying start. Yes, like Dom was saying, this is going to be hopefully a very open and honest, not even debate, a discussion from a student perspective. So think of this as your political equivalent of Netflix and chill. This is going to be very laid back. We are going to, like Dom said, run through a quick panel questions among the panel, and then we're going to open it up to you handsome people. I've had 2 pints and no dinner, so we'll see how this goes. But maybe our panel would like to introduce themselves first. So, in no particular order.
I am really bad with microphones. Is that right?
You're really bad with microphones. You need to
speak.
speak into them.
Okay,
That's the trick.
So I'm Pippa. So I'm here representing Dundee Labour students and like the Labour Party. Yay! Thank you. We weren't that sure if we were going to come to this debate today because before lovely Sophia got involved, there wasn't another woman on this panel, and I think that is kind of shameful from the rest of the political society here that they couldn't find a woman to take part. So that is something that obviously is against our Labour values. We are a party that always puts the representation of women there. So that's something we wanted to sort of start with. Sorry. I'm not sorry, actually.
You don't have to apologise to me. I didn't put them together.
Here.
Good. We're off to a rocket start. This gentleman on my right.
Hi there, my name is Ross. I'm representing DUSA tonight, Dundee University Scottish National Association, the student wing of Scotland's largest political party. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fantastic.
My name is Gord. I am here to represent Dundee University Green Society. I am a second year politics and history. It's great to see so many people here. I think this is a cool thing to do, and I hope that we have a good discussion.
Excellent, fantastic. Are we all audible? Can everybody hear us? Excellent, fantastic. Sophia, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Sophia. As you can understand, I'm not Scottish. I'm from Greece. I'm the president of the International Student Society, and I'm actually political neutral. The reason I'm here is because
there were no other women on the panel. We've just heard that.
Yes, but also because international students are an important part of Scotland, and actually we're 1/3 of the university, and it's part of the everyday life in Scotland. So, as I said, I'm politically neutral, but there are some facts that our internationals are very interested about the referendum and the rest of the elections. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And finally.
Hello all, I'm Kevin Burns. I'm representing the Radical Independence campaign, and because it's not a really established political party, I suppose I'll give those who need enlightenment. It was well, it still is, I suppose, a fairly broad left-wing pro-yes organisation that was meant to sort of broaden the political debate within the Yes camp beyond the parliamentary SNP. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, we've all met the panel. My name's Andrew, by the way, and I've never seen The Lion King. So take from that what you will. We'll jump straight into our first question. This time last year, this is the 1-year anniversary of the referendum, 55% of voters decided to stay within the UK. But since then, parties that have supported independence have seen their numbers rise dramatically, as our SNP candidate has illustrated for us. So why has this happened? And maybe we'll start with Ross. So why has the SNP seen a huge surge in support despite a clear mandate from the public to stay within the UK?
Well, I think there's many reasons. We've been in government now for 8 years, so people can judge us on that. But I think the thing that people are mostly attracted to this party are because it's something new. Like, you can watch Prime Minister's Questions and you look at two old men shouting across at each other. Nobody really wants to watch that. You know, it's boring. Tonight's something different as well. It's politics without the pish, right? And that's why people want to come to the SNP. We offer something new. We want to give new ideas, exciting ideas as well. And after the referendum, people were just like, you know what, the Yes campaign, it was fun. Let's keep that going. Let's keep the party going. You don't want to stop it, so no need.
Fair enough. Well, we'll jump straight over to our only unionist candidate here tonight.
Well, yeah, the SNP did. I think they did capture a lot of people's political interest, and as did the No campaign. With a lot of people, we in Labour have seen 40,000 new members since. I don't know when actually, but I think that
since Jeremy Corbyn came along, no.
And also on like a student level, because obviously we are all students. We've seen in Dundee Labour students a lot of an increase in like interest in us, and that started like last year with the referendum. And it's kind of increased like for the rest of the year. So I think that like the SNP have captured a lot of people's interest, but so have like other parties like Labour. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. So, Kevin. From a radical perspective,
Not that radical, but yeah.
I don't know why that's funny. He's self-identified as a radical.
I suppose, yeah.
So, what's your take on this?
Well, I think the Yes campaign kind of translated very, very quickly into party political politics because to be pro-independence in that referendum, in order to win hearts and minds, you had to set up a relatively cohesive, united message. That message was all the things that the Westminster neoliberal and Blairite factions that had dominated politics for hitherto had consistently said, this is unpopular. Nobody wants this. And as soon as the Yes campaign set about setting out these totally unpopular, allegedly fringe left ideas, it became apparent that it was incredibly popular. A lot of people were thinking about it. So I think that's why the SNP and the Green Party really did very well too. Jumped up their numbers very quickly. As Jeremy Corbyn victory is obviously filling the ranks of the British Labour Party at the minute. So
well, Gord, Ross has just said that that the SNP represent the only alternative within the political mainstream, but many would argue that surely the Green Party is the real alternative.
Yeah, I think within the Greens what we tried to do is have a distinctive Yes campaign. We had our own Green Yes campaign, and we tried to put forward a different message because there are a lot of things on which Greens and SNP will sort of differ on. But I think in terms of the referendum itself, I think what we saw last year was a remarkable, unprecedented kind of democratic exercise that touched pretty much everyone in the country and people with Scottish connections further afield. And I think the level of kind of participation is remarkable. And when you look at sort of voter turnout numbers in the last few years and things like that, they've been disappointingly low. But we had an amazingly high turnout. And I think that however you feel about the outcome, I think that's something that as a country, as a society, we should be really proud of. And the second remarkable thing about that was that it was conducted in a civil manner. It was conducted through words and not violence. There were protests and demonstrations, but they were overwhelmingly completely peaceful. And I think we're incredibly lucky to live in a society that can do that can have a mature, responsible debate about who we are and how we are governed and where the power kind of lies without resorting to violence that we've seen in other countries. Certainly like in the Arab Spring and things like that, there was a lot of sort of protests that were marred with violence. There's been violent clashes in places like Greece and Egypt and things like that as well. So I think we can be proud that we managed to hold it in a very, very civil manner. And it's like I said, it's completely unprecedented. In terms of why people sort of flocked to the yes voting parties afterwards, I think the message that we were lucky in the sense that we were the yes side. So immediately there's a kind of positive implication there. But also we had an agenda of change. We were all standing for various reasons and on different platforms completely, but we had change at the heart of it. We said that the old way isn't working anymore. Let's bring in the new. And I think people were really sort of captured by that. It's certainly people that had been alienated by politics. And for me, it was kind of summed up on the day of the vote itself outside the voting booths when we had sort of various placards outside them, as you often get. And the green one, we had a sort of little one that said seize the opportunity. And right next to it was a much larger one that said vote no, it's not worth the risk. And I think more people identified with seizing the opportunity than with the it's not worth the risk message. So I think that's why we came out of it with increased numbers.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Sophia, from an international perspective, have there been other instances of a rise in nationalist support despite a unionist declaration of this nature? Is this a unique situation to Scotland? Sorry, is this a situation? Is the Scottish 2 pints and no dinner? Bear with me. Is this a situation that we've seen anywhere else? That'll do it.
From my perspective and from the people I've talked to, is something that it's quite common in general in the world. When there are elections for such an important issue as whether a country, like for example Scotland, to leave the UK or to stay, around the world actually, you can see that people don't realize the importance of it until the day where they are actually voting. And after the day that people vote, actually you can see an increase of people actually realizing they can make a difference in this world.
So the public are idiots, that's what you're trying to say?
No, no. All I'm saying is that some people realize that they need to do further research, but sometimes they realize after the day of the crisis, which is quite an unpleasant thing. As you can see, the result was actually very close.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is the public are idiots. No?
No.
No. Good. Good. Well, I'm glad we've cleared that up. Next question. Gord, you alluded to this earlier. The Scottish referendum was praised internationally as being carried out in a totally civil manner, something that I feel the Scots have learned from the Northern Irish in so many ways. But has the result left any cracks within Scottish society, or has it brought us closer together? How do we stand now?
I think with regards to that, if people do perceive cracks, I think a lot of that had to do with the binary nature of the question. You were asked a straight yes/no thing. There was very little opportunity for sitting on the fence. When you have political discussions with your friends and with your family, there's very often varying degrees of shades of different sort of opinions. There's people are on a sort of spectrum about it. But the question we were asked had a yes/no answer, and it was very difficult to kind of take a middle ground, and not many people sort of were sitting there and sort of saying maybe. So I think the fact that it was a sort of yes/no question sort of played into that. But I don't think it has divided the country. I think if you did see cracks in terms of the difference of opinion, I think they were sort of crack's the wrong word. Disagreement is probably a better word. I think those things were already there, but they were just hugely highlighted by the binary nature of the question. A lot of the disagreements that we have in politics, we don't often get to settle it with a yes/no question. When you vote in a general election, you often have at least half a dozen candidates, sometimes more. If you have politicians that are voting on amendments to bills and things like that, there's varying degrees of how much you can leave in, how much you can take out. So I would like to think that most families that did disagree on the question were able to kind of disagree in a sort of mature, sensible manner, and I think that was kind of reflected. So if there was cracks, I wouldn't use that word necessarily, but I think that was the nature of the question, and it's very hard to sit on the fence when you're being asked a straight yes or no question.
Can you say crack one more time?
No.
Thank you. Ross, what's your take on this?
I think that last year... Sorry, what was the question again, sorry?
I've entirely forgotten. I was just totally caught up in Gord saying crack. After a year, the referendum, has it left cracks within Scottish society that have not healed, or have we become closer? This being such a divisive issue, you would surely think that yes-no disagreements between friends, between families, would continue even after a year. But has Scottish society become closer, or is it still as divisive as it was before?
I think the referendum completely changed Scottish society for the better and forever, to be honest, because it engaged a whole generation of people, young people. Well, it engaged everybody, but it engaged a whole new generation. Young people were going to political events. Look at this room. This room's full tonight. If this was maybe 10 years ago, young people might think, you know what, can't really be bothered with politics. So the legacy of the referendum is there may be some divides between parties at certain times, but there's people on these seats here that we could work with, we'd find common ground with, we'd disagree. Politics is divisive anyway. You're not always going to agree with people. So yeah, there are divides, but is that purely because of the referendum? No. All in all, the referendum was a positive thing. The referendum was the envy of the democratic world. People looked at Scotland last year and thought, wow, why can't we have something like that? So I think it's something that we should be proud of.
Pippa?
I think at the beginning, perhaps after the referendum, I do think there was still a few cracks. I think that it was quite difficult for people sometimes to put aside their differences, but it's been a year now, and I think that, kind of echoing what you said about there are similarities, there are common grounds. I think that we need to work together to, I mean, the Tories aren't here, so I can say it, but to get things and UKIP aren't here, thank God. I think there's things, I don't know where I'm going with this. I think there's things we can work together with, and I think that is important. I think that it was, like you said, a yes or no question. I think that did divide people, but what is more important, and especially in a student politics, bring it back, is that we work together on things. Things with the refugee crisis, I thought that was really good that people came together and said that people are welcome and supported and stuff like that. I think that's something we need to go forward with.
Well, thank you very much. Sophia?
From a point of view of someone who is not part of, who is not Scottish, at the beginning you could see a bit that there was a division between the people, and actually still right now you can actually see the people who would prefer Scotland to be independent. But the thing is, I'll give you an example. I'm from Greece, and we had the referendum this summer. And literally, the whole country was divided into yes or no, just for whether we should accept or not the EU, the new EU grant.
Sorry, Sophia, can I interrupt you just there? Gents, we're trying to have a debate here. Thank you. Sorry.
So basically, we actually almost had a civil war between the country just for a yes or a no. So coming back to Scotland, see how's everything here after a year, I can say that Scotland is actually getting stronger. And I don't think people are only focused right now on whether they want an independent Scotland, because there are more. There's the referendum of EU, which is coming up in 2 years, and at the same time there is the European crisis, which I think people are starting to focus on as well, so, since they've started becoming so active in politics.
Well, that's a good point you raise about. It's a good point you raise about the upcoming EU referendum. We'll get round to that in a little bit. But Kevin, your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would agree with I think the overwhelming consensus here that in no way is Scotland a properly divided society. I do think there are divisions, and I think what the referendum did in a way was it reinvigorated certain divisive elements that already existed anyway within Scottish society. But I think the really, really big divide, and probably the only one that the referendum, I think, really brought about, was a generational one. I think if you look at the breakdown of the age groups on which way they voted, 59% of 16 to 34-year-olds voted yes. That's huge. It's really, really significant. It's a fairly dominant position for the young people. And by purely anecdotal evidence and stuff like that, I've heard loads of stuff about families going at each other over the dinner table as far as Christmas and stuff like that, over their no voting son or their yes voting dad and stuff like that. So I do think there was a bit of a generational divide. But other than that, I don't think that there's any really big, dangerous Northern Irish style divides of
Northern Irish style.
Yeah, representing.
Are you coining a new political phrase?
Yeah, just the bad kind of divide.
The bad kind of divides. Okay, thanks for that. Well, Kevin, you've mentioned it, and Ross, you mentioned it as well. This referendum had a huge generational aspect, and the SNP in the run-up to the referendum were criticised in their advocating of lowering the voting age to include 16-year-olds as hopefully catching some not as well researched yes votes, or maybe some yes votes that might have been based off of I don't want to say a deluded sense of nationalism, but maybe 16-year-olds weren't the best placed to make a rational, logical decision about a referendum. Ross, what are your thoughts on that?
Like I said earlier, democracy, is a good thing. So 16, 17-year-olds should have the vote, not just in the referendum, but all the time. The Scottish Parliament are getting that now. The UK haven't yet. But more on the point for the referendum, I don't think they were doing it I don't think the SNP were doing it just to get more yes votes. I think they were doing it because they looked at 16, 17-year-olds. You can do so many things when you're 16, 17. Effectively, everything that an adult can do, excluding buy alcohol and fireworks and tobacco and stuff, right? But you can do everything else. So why can't you vote for the people who? Why can't you vote? Why can't you vote for the people who make those laws anyway? So it's just kind of a little bit pathetic. And on the thing is, people might not be as well informed. In reality, if you looked at 16, 17-year-olds last year, they were amongst the most informed people in the whole political spectrum. Because you went on Twitter, you went on Facebook, you went on all these media sites, you've got it and basically in your hand, on your phone. If you want to find out something, you go on your phone, find out. Older people, they're looking at papers or whatever, but that's why I think 16, 17-year-olds to have the vote is a good thing, not a bad thing, and all for it.
Well, you've mentioned there about the power of social media, and just today there is a new hashtag resurfacing, hashtag still yes. So how much of a role did social media play in this referendum? I mean, was it a tool for really positive political change, or was it just something quite cheap to get a very black or white message across? I mean, how much debate can you really have on social media?
I mean, if I'm honest, I think that we put too much emphasis on how much of a debate is happening on social media. I think that often you stick to your own bubble of what you believe in, you follow who you agree with. And if I'm honest, my experience of social media over the referendum was not positive. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. I think that, for me, a lot of my experiences were people just sort of leaving horrible, abusive comments. I know Margaret Curran, the MP in Glasgow, not anymore, she wrote in a piece about how much sexist abuse she got during the referendum on Twitter. And I think that while we can say that social media is a good thing, and I think it is, I think that we also do need to behave on it, and I think we need to treat each other with respect and not be sexist or horrible or offensive. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, to be honest.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Absolutely. the power of social media. Sophia, we saw the power of social media through the Arab Spring. Surely, though, social media is something that can be very easily manipulated to provide disinformation as well. So, what I'm asking is, well, I'm not sure really. Well, like Pippa said, and Ross said, it can provide a platform for further research and show what's happening on the ground. But, well, like I said, surely it's really easily manipulated. Surely we can't just rely on social media. So what sort of impact has it had in an international?
I'll tell you a true fact about internationals. Internationals don't watch TV in the UK. We don't care about watching the news and the TV in the UK. It's not our country.
It's awful, isn't it?
Sorry for that. And we also, like... and only a few of us actually read the newspaper in here. The thing is, our only way for communication is actually the social media. And being in the International Society for the past 2.5 years, whenever I was talking to people about the referendum, they didn't really care over the summer. But once they came back on campus, everybody was just on their phones because everything you could see everything on Twitter, you could see everything on Facebook. Obviously, you can use this as for manipulation as well and misinformation. But the thing is, if you're actually, when people become actually interested, they can form their own opinions. And I can actually give you an example. In 1 month, if I'm not mistaken, in Bulgaria, there will be a referendum together with the mayor elections, whether or not to change their whole voting system and turn it into an online system. And Romania Prime Minister is also researching on this topic. So moving towards the technological area, I think social media are a big part of our lives, and it's a way to inform, especially students and people who are not so interested into the old media, like newspapers.
Kevin, any thoughts?
Well, I think social media, if anything, social media did not have a far enough reach in the independence debate. I think I disagree that it's social media is easy to manipulate for the simple reason that if 100 people are randomly firing off opinions into Twitter and they all reach the same conclusion, that's different to whether there's an editor saying, right lads, we need 100 opinion pieces and we need you to reach in and around this conclusion, which really what happened with the controlled media, newspapers, BBC, that sort of stuff. So
but
I think
surely 100 people, whether an editor is present or not, surely that's a drop in the ocean in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah, I know, but like if you we're concerned with not hundreds but hundreds of thousands, and really what the referendum was total democratic debate, the most democratic, accessible debate that ever really happened. I'm not doing down the papers. I will do down the BBC. The BBC did a shocking job. That was it's often said, each side of the debate had their own propaganda wings. Yes campaign had wings over Scotland, the Bella Caledonia, and the No campaign had the BBC in its entirety, and that to me was shocking. I think the reason that
You're not angling for a job at the BBC anytime soon, are you?
not in the near future.
Good.
Although my mum did used to work for them, so I'm not really that bad with them. But yeah. But I do think that the reason that the No campaign won was because no matter how vibrant and no matter how involved and engaging the debate on social media was, you could never guarantee that 100% of the population had the opportunity to get into it. The older generations did not get into it. There is evidence that if you took neutral persons, people who did not make up their mind about whether yes or no, and you gave them balanced articles for and against, they were to the tune of about 80% likely to leave the room going, yeah, I'm going to vote yes. I think the way that the No campaign won was essentially shutting down any pro-independence debate in any media outlets that they could control. I mean, let's remember, there was only one pro-yes paper, the Herald. not a very well-read paper. I've never seen anybody buy the Herald. I think the STV was probably the only one who ever really even gave a proper debate, and the BBC. I mean, I don't even need to talk to them. They were hilarious at times for doing stuff like. Remember that thing with Alex Salmond where he gave a 7-minute answer to Nick Robinson, and then the report he didn't say. He just goes, Alex Salmond didn't answer, and walked off. Yeah, it was stuff like that. It was hilarious. And the only reason any of us would have known that was because of the social media, because there were people tweeting in the press conference going, "That was ridiculous. That really was ridiculous." So I do think, especially if you're 67 years old, probably not the sort of Twitter or Facebook user, I think your access to information was completely dominated by unionist media outlets, and I think that was a big problem. So I think that's the reason why the No campaign won in the end.
Okay. I'm gonna ask Gord for his final thought on this, and then Pippa, I'm gonna come to you for a response to that. So, Gord, BBC, a force for evil. Top Gear's not on anymore, so it can't be that bad.
I think I've always stuck up for the BBC whenever it's come under attack. And I think one thing that, especially those of us who voted yes and had a lot of problems with the way the BBC presented their referendum coverage, whether that is justified or not, I think we need to be very, very careful about thinking about the types of people that want to see the BBC diminish in its influence. And the people
what do you mean by that? What types of people?
The types of people that want to see the BBC diminish in its influence are the competing media outlets in the UK. The Murdoch for one, but the Daily Mail, for example, and the Express as well are never shy to publish anti-BBC articles. I think the BBC is something that we can all be proud that we have. I think there's not too many countries in the world that have a national broadcaster on that scale. I do have issues with some of their referendum coverage, but I think a lot of that came down to this kind of overwhelming need that they have, or kind of mandate that they have to be as impartial as possible. So you had a situation where they were reporting on, say for example, like town hall debates in Motherwell, for instance. They would report and say that there's been town hall debates, some yes debates and some no debates. And what was often the case was that there was significantly more yes debates happening than there was no debates happening. Because the BBC has to remain impartial, they were presenting it as if it was kind of sort of 50-50. We saw a similar thing when they broadcast a climate change debate on the radio about a year or so ago, and they had a panel. 50% of the panel were talking about climate change being a sort of real threat, and the other 50% were saying that climate change is nonsense. Despite the fact that the overwhelming
get back on the topic
it's that they have to be impartial. They later apologise for that, but they have this kind of like obsession with being impartial. So I wouldn't be too quick to put down the BBC, given what would emerge in its place if the BBC was no longer there. I think you'd be putting a lot more power in the hands of people that certainly don't deserve it and certainly wouldn't use it in your interests.
Okay. Pippa, we've talked about the power of social media, especially among young people. Now, surely well, as some of our panelists would phrase it, the blame for a no vote at the referendum, surely that cannot be laid at the feet of the BBC in its entirety. Surely we should have more respect for people to make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really quite, I can't remember the word, I think it's quite quick to say, oh, it's the BBC's fault. I think that is clearly not the only reason why people voted no. I also think it's quite interesting that Kevin quickly says that, that no was the one that was shutting down debate, that it was, that was the problem, when in reality, and you don't address any of the aggression that was there. Wins over Scotland, for example, I mean, I've got nothing nice to say about them. The way they go after people is horrible. It's aggressive, and it's not the way we should be promoting politics. We should be chatting civilized and properly, but instead, you have people feeling intimidated. I felt intimidated. I've been on Wings Over Scotland. There's my face circled around. I think you're quite quick to quickly say that Twitter was this amazing place of free discussion where everyone felt welcome, and that is not the case. It was not accessible, and I don't think that the BBC is entirely the reason why people voted No. Also, when you said that thing about what was it, 80% of people when they read the facts voted yes. Really?
It was the Guardian did that piece, and it was quite an interesting article. But yeah, we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, but yeah, I think you're really quick to ignore that aggression. I think that you need to.
I will answer it now if you like.
I mean.
Kevin, we'll let her finish, and then we'll come to some responses.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, Twitter was not accessible, and I think if you think it was, you're ignoring a lot of the abuse that you saw happen, surely. So.
Should I? Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there was maybe I've been misunderstood. I'm not saying that social media, being what I would say is virtually 100% democratic, meaning you can get it out and tweet it into the ether, whatever you want to say.
Wait, are you trying to say that not everything I read on the internet is true?
Not all the time. But
you'll excuse me, I have some phone calls to make.
But yeah, I do agree. I mean, trolling culture, the idea that you can just put people down and cause distress to people for a laugh, essentially, that is not something that was particular to the independence campaign. That is something that is particular to the internet. If you give everybody immediate access, you get nasty people. Society has nasty people in it. That is, but nasty people get to tweet their opinions, the thing too, because that's democratic. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying it's great. I was subjected to immense abuse, particularly upon our old friends back in Northern Ireland for having things. I got threats. I got everything. And yeah, it's distressing. Well, it would be distressing if I was in the same country. I wasn't, so I felt fairly safe. But and they weren't going to get the rail and sail over to get
It's
me.
a long ferry ride over to punch someone in the face, isn't it?
They're probably calmed down by the time they got to Glasgow. It'd be grand. But yeah, I agree. Like, but the whole cybernet thing and that every yes campaigner was some sort of vitriolic abuse junkie that was put across. I don't buy into it. I don't think anybody else buys into it. And I think it also conveniently ignores the huge amounts of, quite frankly, extremely right-wing, really, really nasty and divisive characters retreating on the unionist side. But of course, they didn't get a shout in because the mainstream media that reports this sort of thing didn't want to hear it. That's all.
Okay, well, it's getting a wee bit heated, so I think we'll quickly move on from that. Sophia, for Scotland recorded the highest percentage of people voting yes. So what does the no declaration mean for the populace of a growing Dundee? With a city who overwhelmingly voted yes, what does this mean in the larger picture? What are there any examples from the international arena?
I can talk from the students. Like, I know the international students that seen Dundee. At the beginning, obviously, we had a lot of internationals who were actually very keen, because comparing to their countries back home, they wanted Scotland to be free as well. All the other things they were saying, because internationals were allowed to vote if they were 6 months in here. They said, this is not my choice. It's not good it's not good if I vote for this country. But for what we've seen from Dundee, Dundee is saying the same it was. It's saying as strong as it was. There's no change whether, obviously Dundee was a yes city, but in the end, it won't go down. It will keep growing the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Gord, what does an overwhelming majority of yes supporters mean in a country that has voted no? Should we break away and start our own People's Republic?
Yeah, I saw somebody at work the other day who had a People's Republic of Dundee T-shirt, which I admired that they'd gone to the lengths of getting a T-shirt printed, but I think that's taking things a little bit too far. It's kind of interesting. I think Dundee is a city that did have a sort of majority yes vote.
Well, it definitely did.
It definitely did, yeah. But it also had one of the lowest turnouts, which was disappointing. We had a 68% or 69% turnout, I think, which was significantly lower than some other parts. So that respect was disappointing. I think we're kind of lucky that we're here at this institution of the University of Dundee, a sort of well-respected worldwide institution. But we need to remember that Dundee is not a rich city, and by that I mean the majority of people that live in Dundee are living in poverty. We are a poor city that has pockets of rich, and we're in a situation in Dundee now where we have 2 SNP MPs, 2 SNP MSPs, and an SNP-run city council. Now, whatever you think of the Scottish National Party, to me that's concerning because that's not democratic. And I would have preferred to have seen a bit more variety, but you know, people voted for them, so that's where we are. But we now need to hold those people to account. The SNP advocated for a yes vote, so we now need to hold them to account. And we have a situation where we have millions of pounds worth of development going into Dundee that you see down at the waterfront, which I'm in favour of, incidentally.
Yeah, we finally got that bridge over to Tesco.
But yeah, but we need to make sure that the waterfront brings people together and doesn't alienate people. So the poorest people that...
Well, hang on. How does a waterfront bring people together rather than alienate people?
Because you make it accessible for people. So, for example, when Dundee went through a sort of period of expansion following the decline of the industries in the 50s and 60s, a lot of housing estates were built on the outskirts, places like Fintry and Ardler and things like that. And people were forced to move out of them because of increasing rents in the city centre. Now, if you've ever tried to take a bus from somewhere like Fintry into the centre of Dundee, it can take you up to an hour. I've done the journey plenty of times, and it takes a long time.
And you're taking your life in your hands.
Well, if you couple that with the fact that a lot of people that are living out there, they're maybe single mothers with 2 or 3 children who can't very well load all their kids onto a bus and come into the centre of Dundee to enjoy all the lovely facilities that we have at the waterfront. They're stuck where they are. They can't afford to run cars and things like that. So we need to be aware of these people. And what I would say to yes voters who have voted SNP, certainly in Dundee, is that we need to start holding the SNP to account. We need to see more power being devolved to our local communities. We need to see the city council have more power to change council tax rates and things like that for people who are on lower incomes. We need to see more democracy at a local level. And I worry...
Hang on, surely that starts from above.
No, it starts top. It starts from the bottom. You can change things from the bottom. We need to demand that our SNP councillors are knocking off the door of their Holyrood colleagues and saying, we can't do anything, we can't change things, we need more power, we need to raise our own funds and do it in a way that sort of benefits our people. So if you did vote yes and you voted because you wanted to see a fairer, more equal society, which many of us did.
Okay, listen, Gordon, I'm gonna stop you there, and I'm gonna give Ross an opportunity to respond to that. So the SNP need to be held to account, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question regarding turnout. So if you wouldn't mind responding to Gord's statement first, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah, he's totally correct. Like, people need to be held to account. Doesn't matter what party you're in, if it's the SNP, Labour, Tories, Greens, whatever, right? You need to be held to account. He's got a point, you know. It's like the city chambers are dominated by SNP, Holyrood dominated by SNP, and Dundee, Westminster as well. But I think that shows that people in Dundee, you know, they obviously put their trust in SNP MPs, MSPs, councillors. They obviously put their trust in them for a reason. And he's on about democratic control. You know, if it was up to me, you know, I'd change the whole voting system. So, you know, maybe we do get more Green people in the city council. Maybe we do have people fair represented, so it's not dominated. You know, the SNP are fortunate they've had a minority government and now a majority government. But when you have a minority government, you have to make alliances. You can't just push everything through. And you know, real democracy, you should be able to work together. It shouldn't just be party splits all the time. You know,
well,
we
hang on,
live in this society together. So
you've used the word dominate a number of times tonight. Why should the SNP make alliances?
For a number of reasons, because we have to live in a society together, and what the SNP don't represent all of Scotland. You know, as much as I'd like everybody to agree with SNP, people don't. So you have to make consequences. You have to concede points. That's something about politics. Otherwise, you just have a party running away. Fair enough. People want to vote SNP. That's fine. But as he was saying, you know, I want to see more democracy, closer to the people. Start from the bottom up. Why not?
Okay, fair enough. I'll just point out, you got a round of applause from our sound engineer tonight, which is truly praise from Caesar, because this man has the power to turn off any one of our microphones at any one time if he hears something he doesn't like. So, just a quick follow-up question. Gord mentioned the fact that while Dundee was overwhelmingly a yes vote, it suffered the lowest turnout. Surely a low turnout undermines the validity of a high yes vote in the city.
Well, he says it was around 69% or whatever. That's still incredibly high for what we're used to. You know, usually in a general election, certain areas of Dundee, you know, you're getting turnouts of maybe 40% in certain areas, so that's almost a 30% increase. People of Dundee should be proud of that. It's not as great as the overall 85% turnout, but it's still something to be incredibly proud of. And if anything, the people who didn't vote, who aren't engaged with politics, you know, I think more or less likely, if they were engaged with politics, I think they'd probably vote yes as well, and would have an even stronger position to stand from. But
okay, thank you. Pippa, I've entirely forgotten what I'm going to ask you, and now I've remembered. How can Labour make inroads in the highest voting yes proportion city of Scotland? Do you know what I'm saying? 2 pints, no dinner. How can Labour make inroads in a city where the overwhelming majority of people, despite a low turnout, have voted yes?
I think because going on with what Gord said about the higher levels of poverty in Dundee, the SNP have spent the last 8 years talking about independence. They've ignored major issues with health, with education. Kezia Dugdale's first speech in Holyrood about when she was leader was about education. I think it's something like 4,000 children leave primary school unable to read. And the SNP have been in power now for 8 years. It's time you address those issues that have clearly you could have changed.
And Labour are better placed to address those issues.
Definitely. Rather than talk about borders, we have talked about inequality. We have talked about trying to change that, about making sure that when children leave, they have the greatest chance they can have. I think that is my major concern with the SNP, is that we can't just keep talking about another referendum when it's going to go yes. We need to talk about the issues that are affecting people, because these are people's lives and like they need to be improved. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Pippa has talked about the issues outside of a simple yes/no vote. What other issues are right at the doorstep of Dundee as a yes voting city?
Well, I think one of the things about Dundee is that Dundee is, as we've previously covered before, a ridiculously impoverished city. We have child poverty rates of over 40%. We have some of the highest rates of unemployment, and quite a lot of the areas, the houses should have been condemned and built up again. It's almost as bad as Northern Ireland, and that's saying something for such a rich country as Scotland.
You're really bigging up Northern Ireland there.
I'm not a fan. I think that the question that Pippa said, that we were talking about the issues of inequality and stuff like that, the two go together. The political system in which you live in determines whether progressive politics succeeds. We cannot have and I'm going to say this now, and you can hold me, every single person in this room can hold me to account later. We cannot have nice things under a Westminster government. This is a deep state. These people do, like, even if Jeremy Corbyn tomorrow grabs absolute control or near absolute democratic control, the ability of him to change things are going to be impeded at every level of the civil service, of the defence structures, of the tax nature, and in our private sectors. That it's difficult because this is an avowedly neoliberal country. And I think when that comes back to Dundee, I don't know. Radical Independence's campaign was essentially about mobilising people who had never been mobilised before. We were going door to door in the rain, sleet, and snow, which was basically most of the weather running up to the referendum, knocking on people's doors in the worst housing, what I would say the toughest, the poorest housing estates.
Well, hang
And
on.
we
You
got
can't,
70
you can't justify a position like that simply because of how hard you campaigned. Everybody, every single political party campaigned just as hard during the referendum. So, I mean, why?
I think. Well, I think the Radical Independence campaign was fairly rightfully credited with scooping up the votes that mainstream political parties left behind. We had a lot, that great institution, the Party of the People, the Labour Party. It doesn't jump to my mind who exactly said it, but when asked why he wasn't going to working class estates in Glasgow, he said, well, you know, people with mattresses in the front lawn don't decide elections.
Okay,
That's the sort of where we were going out. We got in Charleston, where me and Jalal campaigned, we got a 70% yes vote. We got the highest turnout that particular area had voted. And I would also challenge Pippa's accusation that child poverty.
Let's. I'm sorry to reiterate this, but let's just keep it laid back. It's politics without piss.
Yeah.
Let's avoid words like accusations, blame,
Fair
this
enough.
kind of thing. We'll just keep it real mellow.
Sure, mellow. I'll lay back.
Mellow.
Right, but we've got to remember that as much as I'm not an SNP member and only occasionally will I lend my support to the SNP, it cannot be laid at their door that poverty is so high in Dundee. This constituency, Dundee West, the first time that it wasn't a Labour seat in the 55 years since it was created was this term. It was every single year or every single parliamentary term it had been, yes, why didn't they tackle the issues then? 55 years to get going. They didn't. They don't care. So I don't think, and especially in this country, in Scotland, where Labour dominated almost entirely through until very, very recently. I just don't think. I don't think they tackled issues of poverty then. I don't think and I now think that their accusations that the SNP aren't tackling are fairly insincere.
Okay, I think we shall leave that topic there. We'll move on to something a little bit more mellow. Well, I say mellow. I'm going to talk about the upcoming EU referendum. So, in the next 2 years, the whole of the UK is going to be asked whether to vote on leaving the EU. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let's start with Sophia. Actually, how does an exit from the EU affect the UK? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Does it benefit us? Does it not? I've given you a number of options there. Feel free to choose all of them.
I'm going to talk to you from an international student perspective.
Oh, good. Fantastic. That's actually what I was expecting as the international representative.
There are two, I'm going to divide it in two ways, into a student who is from EU, for example, as myself, and students who are outside the EU, and they're international overseas students. I actually have a talk. I spoke with a lot of international students who are not from EU, students from Malaysia, China, Nigeria, India, you name it. And everybody had the same concerns. They are not so concerned as EU students, as I'll explain a bit, from an exit from the EU, because they'll still keep on paying the fees they already pay, the high amount of tax fees. The problem that it will be created for them is that they won't be able to work so easy in the EU if UK exits the EU, which now it's very easy. It's easier than before, and also the procedure for a visa, for a European visa, will change, and they don't know how time-consuming it will be and how costly it will be as well. Talking from my personal perspective as an European student, and I have talked with many European students about it. Everybody says that they're scared the moment you ask them whether.
Scared?
Yes. Most of the European students are actually scared when you tell them to talk about the EU referendum, because there is a very high number of students who are actually going to leave the UK if UK leaves Europe, especially Scottish students who study in Scotland, because we have SAS, which covers Europe, is kind of covering our grounds in order to be in here. And if you actually go to restaurants, you're going to see that international students are most of the students who are doing the lowest jobs, whatever they can do in order to survive in here. And the reason most...
Well, I don't think that's just necessarily confined to international students.
It's not only international students, but it's a high percentage. If you go around talking like from personal experience and from the people I know, all the international students I know are trying their best in order to survive in here, and it's not that they can go home whenever they cannot make it during a weekend, because they need to stay here for the whole year. So I actually know a lot of people who are gonna unfortunately have to leave Scotland if UK leaves the EU.
Okay, thank you. Pippa, an EU exit, a good idea?
I don't think so. I think we should remain part of the UK. Part of the UK? Yeah, we should still remain part of the UK and the EU. I think that it's important that we can... I can't remember where I was going with this. I've got very confused.
That's all right. We can come back to you if you want.
I think it's important to stay a part of the EU. Obviously, Labour are going through a lot of changes at the minute. We've got our new leader, Jeremy Corbyn, but he came out very recently and said that Labour would support completely staying in the EU, and I think it's really important.
Well, it is a shame that we don't have any representatives from UKIP or the Conservatives here tonight. So I feel like we might get a more of a one-sided answer. Kevin, I'll come to you.
Sorry, I was away with the fairies.
Too late now.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a bit of I've reconsidered my attitudes towards the European recently, especially in light of the summer and the Greece crisis and stuff like that. You know, it's not a perfect union. There are a lot of problems with it. A lot of the structures are designed to stop sensible economic policies like nationalisation and stuff like that. However, I think that EU membership, and UKIP would hate me if they were here to see this, has a moderating influence on the UK. I think that there's a lot of animosity that has given political clout against immigrants, against refugees, and quite a lot of animosity to things like human rights legislation and stuff like that. Now, the EU doesn't, it's not a perfect union, but if it can keep a cap on those rather nasty
internet trolls, is that the word?
Yeah, well, it would be political or internet trolls if there wasn't a political party dedicated to it. A very, very successful political party. That to me is terrifying. So in a way, I would rather EU rule rather than Tory UKIP rule. And I know that sounds it's bad, it's anti-democratic, but that's how I feel. And I agree. Most of my friends are from. I mean, I've got lots of Scottish friends, but most of my friends are international in Dundee. I think it's great. I've never seen more colours or religions or different backgrounds, and it's brilliant. I really passionately love this kind of diverse international society. But I know that this is not the preferred option of quite a lot of people that in England, and I know I'm fairly confident that Scotland wants to remain in the EU and it values its immigrant population. But I'm pro EU as long as it puts a cap on the xenophobic attitudes in the British establishment.
So rather than a cap on immigrants, a cap on the xenophobic characters in Scottish and English, British mainstream politics.
Yeah, and Northern Irish.
Northern Irish.
We've got
You'd
a fair
fill
amount of
that cap up fairly pissing quick. Gord, you've been quiet for far too long.
Just been mulling it over. I think what the EU referendum offers us is a similar thing to what the Scottish referendum offered us. It offers us an excuse to kind of get informed and get involved. I don't think we're going to quite see the same participation that we did with the Scottish referendum when it comes for the EU vote, but it is a good excuse to find out what the EU does and how its institutions work and things like that. I think there's a lot of benefits of remaining in the EU. Free movement of trade and people being the sort of number one thing. I can go to a number of different countries and not have to worry about it too much. But I know that I will have the same rights and freedoms in those countries as I do over here because of the agreements that we have. And I think that's a great thing. I think that's something that should be celebrated, that we can be responsible enough to have our own laws and our own ideas, but yet understand that other countries we have a lot in common with. So I think that's a great thing. I know that I'm going to be safe and protected whenever I travel in Europe. My concern about Europe, and I will vote to remain in Europe, just to make that clear. My concern about Europe, and this is what I mean by getting sort of informed and involved with it, is that it's not as democratic as it could be. We have a very low turnout for European parliamentary elections, thus giving our MEPs not a huge mandate with which to make decisions, but they're only a very small part of the decision-making process. It's not quite like sort of a national government. You have sort of various unelected sort of levels as well. So I'd love for us to, as a country, whether that's Scotland or the UK, to get more informed and say, hang on a second, this is great, all these things, but it's not quite as democratic as it could be. So always have a check on those that are making the decisions. But overall, yeah, I'd vote to stay in, but I think everyone needs to know what we're voting for.
Great, thank you very much. Ross, surely this presents something of a very difficult issue for the SNP. Voting to, advocating leaving the UK. What's the SNP view on an EU referendum?
I think the view was not to have it, but personally, you know what, let's bring it on, because I trust the EU, I trust the arguments for the EU can clearly be made. Let's have this referendum, let's have an open, transparent debate about it, and the benefits will heavily outweigh anything bad about the EU, so let's have it. Scotland within Europe, that's the SNP's policy anyway.
Excellent. Well, I think we can all agree that when the EU debate does happen, I think we can hope that it's conducted with the same civil-mindedness as our independence referendum was. I'm going to open up to the floor for questions very, very quickly. Can I just ask for some very brief answers to my next question? Looking ahead to the 2016 Holyrood elections, how can the opposition parties robustly respond to the current dominance of the SNP? I'm going to start with you, Pippa.
Fab. I think kind of what I said earlier, we need to call out the SNP on the fact that, again, 8 years of chatting about independence and 8 years of not changing things. The devolved powers with health and education, the SNP could have done so much. They haven't. Some of the statistics we've had about like education alone is a reason that the SNP need to be out of power. I think that Labour, our job now is to give people the facts and give people the information about the things the SNP just haven't done. And I think that's how we'll be tackling it with, obviously, Kezia Dugdale as leader.
Okay, thank you. Ross, I'm going to come to you last on this one, so you can respond to some of these individually. Gord.
Yeah, again, I agree with Pippa. I think the SNP have been in power for 8 years, and it's obviously a sign that people do trust them, but I think it's time we ask real questions of the SNP with regards to their education policy. I think it's time we ask real questions of the SNP with regards to the new centralised police force that we have. I think that's a terrible, terrible thing. And we need to examine these issues very, very carefully. We cannot allow the SNP to have carte blanche. We have to question them, and that's what part of being a modern democracy is. So I think in many respects they've done well, but I think we need to really kind of drill down and really start putting pressure on them. They've ridden this tidal wave since the referendum of this surge in membership, but I think it's time to start asking very, very serious questions of the SNP government.
Okay. A quick response?
Yeah. Well, I'm not actually speaking for a political party, so I can kind of have a wee free hand.
Oh, so you can say whatever you like.
I can say
well,
what I like.
let's have it.
I think it's important that the SNP would not be allowed to govern with a free hand. I will lend my critical support to the Green Party in the next Holyrood election. What I'm also thinking of is, now, despite what I said earlier about I'm not optimistic that even if Jeremy Corbyn did win, that he would be able to really make proper change. I am pro a Labour Party led by that man. He is a brilliant man that I agree with most of the time, and it's really refreshing to see somebody in that sort of position with the sort of opinions that I grew up with and that people around me hold, and I've never seen reflected in mainstream politics before. I think for the Scottish Labour Party, if they get on with this programme, if they jump on the Corbyn bandwagon, which they didn't do, I'm afraid, by electing Kezia Dugdale. I think Niall Findlay, whatever. I think he was a good option, and I know there's a lot of other men and women in the Scottish Labour Party that could have done that. So I think if Labour wants to challenge the SNP, which I know they will, embrace the Corbyn, go storming Corbyn. That's
Storming Corbyn. Have you just thought of that there now?
I might have picked it off a newspaper last week. I'm not sure, but yeah, I do think the SNP. I think it's positive for democracy and stuff. The SNP are challenged.
Okay, well, Ross, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to some of these. Education, welfare, centralised police force. Is it not time that the SNP started delivering and some real solutions rather than I can't remember who said it, riding on the momentum of a sizable minority of yes voters?
Well, to be honest, I think the SNP has been delivering for Scotland for the past 8 years, and it's because of the SNP I'm sat here today, because if I had to pay tuition fees, I wouldn't be here. The SNP abolished tuition fees, and that's something that all of us here should be proud of if you don't have to pay for them, you know. Also, on the point of education, okay, we have level exam passes. More people now go into jobs or further education than they would at any other point in their career. Centralised police force, right, we're going to get to this. It's not perfect. I agree it's not perfect, but since we came into power, 1,000 extra police officers are on our streets. People are safer. Crime's at a 40-year low. Judge us on our record, you know, we're going to have this election next year, and I'm confident that if we can defend our record in government, we can win again, because if you look at our record, it's there to see. You know, you look at the health service as well. We've over £12 billion now is in our health service, 10,000 extra staff since 2007. And if you're not happy with that, then what more do you want from us? Because we'll deliver it. There you go.
Okay, well, you've heard from all of our panelists, so I'm going to open up the floor to questions now. This gentleman at the bar right here. Oh, fantastic.
Good question. Thank you, James. All right, so my question is about the fact that you all think that the election is democratic because of the high turnout. One of the things is my family is originally from Dundee, and we emigrated to the United States. So I am an American, but my family is still here. My parents are still Dundonian. They were not allowed to vote in the referendum, and that was something that they were quite upset about, or so they assumed. If that is true, do you think if there was another referendum that should be changed, or what is your personal opinion about that? Being Scottish and not being able to vote once you're out of the country.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Sophia, you had said that, what is the time limit for international students for a vote in the referendum?
6 months.
6 months?
Yes.
Okay, so that actually supersedes your family being from Scotland originally. Surely the SNP would have picked up even more votes. So why didn't you campaign for younger people to have a vote in the election, but not allowing second generation Scottish people to have a vote?
Well, people refer to Scottish people as rats because they'll go all over the world. Doesn't matter where you go, Scottish people are going to be there. It's kind of like if you go on holiday, there's going to be an Irish pub. It's kind of the same thing with Scotland, right? So,
are you referring to the Irish people as rats as well? Because I take exception to that.
Don't hold me on that.
Manchester United supporters, say that.
Anyway, what I'm getting at is the fact that if you were to include everybody who considers themselves partly Scottish or generational Scottish at all, you have over 25 million people around the world who claim some form of Scottish heritage. That's 5 times the population of Scotland. So if you're going to let them vote, it kind of undermines the people who actually live and work here. They can't vote in elections, but they want to vote in this referendum. So, to be honest, no. If you live here, fair enough. People from the international society, you live here, you work here, you study here, yeah, you have a vote.
But not Scottish. No. But not Scottish. So don't have the same cultural, historical ties as second generation do.
Well, they've obviously left Scotland for a reason. They don't want to be here, or they want to do something else. But they get to vote in.
But surely not wanting to. You say not wanting to be here. People don't leave because they don't want to be here. Various options arise, and there are so many reasons for moving.
Yeah.
So you're saying that because you've moved abroad, you've surrendered your right to vote, whereas international students do get a right to vote because they live and work here.
Well, international students surrender effectively their right to vote when they're back home, unless there's an election back home.
Sorry, Sophia, is that the case?
You're not allowed to vote if you're out of the country, but if, like, on the moment of the elections. But if you're actually studying abroad, or for whatever reason you're abroad and you come back to the country the day of the election, you're actually allowed to vote.
So there would never be a case of you studying in Scotland, voting in the referendum, and getting an opportunity to vote in domestic elections in your home country. Fair enough. I'm glad we cleared that up. That's just for my clarification, by the way. So, sorry, Ross, I interrupted you.
Yeah, so effectively, people who leave Scotland, they'll get a vote in another country. So it's like, well, if they get a vote in that other country, they shouldn't get one in Scotland as well, because then they're voting multiple times effectively. Obviously, it's in different systems, but nevertheless, it's not the point.
Okay. What about Scottish people in England?
I think that if you live somewhere, you should be able to vote there. I think that, obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of I didn't catch your name, sorry.
Robert.
I didn't catch Robert's entire case or anything, but I think it's important that if you live somewhere, you get to vote there. And I think if you live in England and you're not registered to vote in Scotland, you shouldn't have a vote in the referendum.
Okay, fair enough.
You're not.
Gord, Kevin, a couple of brief answers to that.
Yeah, no, I think I do kind of have a sort of degree of sympathy of people that have a really strong, very close generational connection with Scotland. But the argument that we certainly put forward in the referendum campaign was that the best people to run Scotland are the people that live and work here and the people that contribute to Scottish society. Now, that's not to sort of diminish the importance of your family and relatives, but it's when you're sort of criticised for ethnic nationalism and things like that. I think the fact that ethnic Scots weren't allowed to vote just because they were ethnic Scots, I think that would have been the wrong thing to do. So, like I said, I stand by the fact that the best people to make decisions that affect Scots are the people that live and work here, and never mind the sort of technical ramifications of allowing millions of other people that don't live here to vote. But I think it was the right thing to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Kevin, a brief answer from you.
Yeah, I fully sympathise with Robert, wasn't it? Yeah. The problem here to me was that it isn't so much a political decision by the SNP to exclude thing. It's a legal question, because there was another referendum on these isles very recently. There was an equal marriage referendum in Ireland. Now, because Ireland is already a country, and because Ireland could already issue passports, it was allowed to say, it doesn't matter if you don't live here at the minute, we know you have a citizenship, you can come home and vote. And there was massive queues in the airports and stuff like that. Home to vote was trending on Twitter and stuff like that. Because Scotland wasn't already a country, there was no way to identify, because you can't identify who would be a citizen of an independent Scotland, it was more difficult to identify who should have the right to vote.
Ironically, an issue that would have been solved by independence.
Yeah, ironically enough, yeah. But I agree. I think that the SNP had probably put a little bit of creative thought and tried to strike a balance between a residential criteria and people have been away living in the United States for a couple of years, but they have reasonable expectation that they might come back. That there should have been a reasonable thing. The only thing there was extremes. There was people who had emigrated to Scotland 3-4 generations ago. There's a very funny thing that the Ulster Scots in Northern Ireland, not all of them obviously, but there was an organisation who wanted Ulster Scots who emigrated from Scotland 300 years ago to get the vote. So there's that extreme. So as long as you're striking a balance between some sort of residential.
Another progressive point for Northern Ireland there.
I know, it's not too bad. We got a causeway. You should go. And Game of Thrones is filmed there, so it's not all that bad. But sure. But yeah, I mean, it's more.
How long have you been working for the Northern Irish Tourist Board?
I don't think
We got a causeway, and Game of Thrones is filmed there.
It's filmed near my house. I go down and see Jon Snow any day I like.
All right, so go to Northern Ireland. You might bump into Hordor. Or you might bump into him in floor 5 when he's DJing here. Right. Any other questions from the floor? Just you. Okay, listen, I just want to clarify one point here. This is, like I've said before, a very relaxed, laid-back debate. We're not going to be accepting any kind of rants or comments. Not that yours is a rant, but that is a perfectly valid question. So how can the SNP justify making all its own laws when the EU controls a significant proportion of those laws?
Well, I don't think our argument is to make all of our laws in Scotland by Scotland. I think we can have most of them and bring power closer to the people, but still be a part of a union in Europe, like a trade union, a free movement of people, free movement of trade. And yeah, sure, Europe do make some laws. I don't think it's as much as 60%. I think that's a bit outrageous. But they make a significant amount, but it has a very, very small impact on people's lives. Europe's a good thing, and I'll argue for Europe, Scotland within Europe, every day of the week.
Okay. Well, since that question was directed straight to the SNP, have any of our other panelists got a comment to make on that? No?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Good. Any other questions? If not, you, sir?
Gordon Brown said he's not happy with the vows. As a Labour representative, are you happy with the vows? And do you feel like they've been...
Happy with the what, sorry?
The vows.
I don't understand that question, but maybe you do.
So what are you asking, sorry? Gordon Brown's not happy with the vows. So how the vow? Right. So obviously I'm not a politician, so I'm not completely sure I'm getting the right answer. to this,
Sorry,
but-
before you go any
Yeah,
further,
sure.
I just want to make it clear again, our panelists here are not representing the party in terms of towing the party line exactly. They are here to represent, firstly, themselves and their political societies within the university. So if we're having any questions of, well, not of that nature specifically, but if you're asking questions which you're wanting a toe the party line answer to, that's not what we're here to do.
What my personal...
That's a very diplomatic way of phrasing that. I'll let you off this time. Pippa, feel free to answer that or not, if you don't want to.
I mean, like, I think we have the issue that it's a Tory government and that they are in Westminster, and obviously that does limit a lot of what Labour can do. I don't think I know completely enough of the ins and outs and facts to really, like, completely go
It's
with
not
this.
what we're here to do. We're not asking for a detailed...
No, then I think that's
breakdown.
where I'm going to go. But can I request we have, like, a question from a woman? Because we've just had men for the past, like, long time. Is that possible? And there's...
So how can we get more female students involved in political societies here in the university? In politics in general. Okay. Pippa?
Like, yeah. I think, as I said at the beginning of this, I think it is disgusting that there aren't enough women on this panel today. I think that's a real shame. I think that women need to be seen in politics. Women need to be on these debates. Women need to be on these panels, because you can only, like, be what you can see. The way of getting more women in politics is through seeing women in politics. I'm a proud member of Labour.
Pippa, let me just stop you there. Jeremy Corbyn has been praised for having more than half his shadow cabinet made up of women. Surely we're making inroads here. Surely this is...
Definitely. Like, I think, again, Labour has always been a party that has put that at the heart of what we do. We were the first party to bring in all-women shortlists 22 years ago, which is before I was even born.
Now, we can argue that all-women shortlists are undemocratic by their nature.
Not when you've got a sexist society and a patriarchal society, but puts women behind and at a disadvantage to begin with, is my response to that.
Fair enough. You heard it here first. Please finish your thought.
Thank you. I can't remember where I was going with it because you interrupted.
Because a man interrupted.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of used to it, sadly.
Did you not get the memo about how this is laid? But I'm just the
I
chairperson.
know,
Jesus
but like,
Christ, leave me alone.
No, yeah.
Well, in the interests of balance, Sophia, you're the head of the International Society. I don't know where I'm going with that thought. I'm leaving it up entirely to your interpretation.
I really don't know what to comment on that. From international perspective, it was always a problem with countries that we don't actually have prime ministers, women, and there are so few.
Germany, Angela Merkel.
I know about that, and it still hurts. But
And it still hurts?
I'm from Greece, remember?
15 love.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry to open up old wounds.
So there was always a problem, actually, having women in power, and Greece actually never had a woman in power. And I think we actually don't even have a party anymore that has a woman that's like one of the main people in the political parties. I really don't know how to make women become more interested in politics, but it's actually there is a problem in general in the society. Like everyone was like, "You're president of one of the biggest societies on campus, and you're a woman," and I was like, "Yeah, my committee, half of the committee that we have here are just run by men, and like in my committee is like 3 or 4 women, and the rest of the like 6, 7 men." I don't know how to change that, but there is a common issue that we actually need to address too, and further work on it.
Okay, well, at the risk of getting crucified here, this is not a debate about the role of women in politics. This is a debate. This is a discussion about where we are as a Scottish society 1 year after the referendum. But I will ask the young lady who asked the question: what is your one idea to get women more interested, more involved, and more engaged with politics? Sorry, I can't hear you. Okay, well, we'll take that as a final thought. We'll take just 2 more questions, 2 more very brief questions.
The Yes campaign, the No campaign, used a lot of publicity, like TV ads and things, and like radio things. And the Yes campaign were accused of being very positive, while sometimes ignoring some of the facts that could have been seen as being detrimental. And the No campaign was seen as being very negative and fear-mongering. Do you think that this had a major effect on how people reacted and how people voted?
Sorry, would you mind giving us a little bit more clarification on that?
Do you think that people voted no because of so much fear-mongering? And do you think that the high proportion of people voting yes was because that SNP maybe showed a very one-sided view of the argument and dismissed the no campaign as just being fear-mongering as opposed to just facts?
Do any of our panelists have a response or a comment to that?
I think it's a good question. I think that again, this is my own personal view. I think in Better Together, and I think that campaign, I do sometimes think we didn't put out a positive state for the UK as much as we should have. I think that's even though it was a once in a lifetime referendum, if there is another referendum, I think that is something that we should definitely make the positive case for the UK more. I think I agree that the SNP and the Yes campaign, did ignore a lot of the issues around independence. I mean, obviously I'm biased, I voted no. But yeah, I think it is a fair point.
That is the fundamental flaw with that question, is you are asking people who are representing political societies in that. So we're not going to get a totally detached answer. Sorry, Pippa.
I think I was fairly detached though. I think I do agree with you. I think it is a good point. I think it's something that you're always going to have that issue with politics. You're never going to present your own argument negatively, are you? But it is something that is a fair point. Like both sides were guilty of it, of sort of delivering the message they wanted. Which, yeah.
Okay. Any of our other panelists, just a very brief point to that, Gord.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Pippa there. One of the advantages of doing a lot of these kind of things, I did a few of these things in Dundee in the lead up to the referendum, and the audiences were sort of mostly positively sort of yes voters, so it was very, very easy for me to kind of stand up in front of a room who mostly agree with me. I commend Pippa for taking this platform today as well. But in terms of, there's been a lot of talk of when the next referendum will be. I don't think it should be anytime soon. I think the simple fact is that we lost the referendum because we lost the argument. And I think what we now need to do as yes voters is come away and come up with an alternative argument. I particularly think that the currency argument was a terrible one from the Yes campaign, and particularly the SNP. In the Greens, we didn't agree that we should be keeping the pound. And I think it's time for us, we've had a year to reflect, but I think we need a good few years longer to find out ways how we can sort of persuade people. So if you did vote yes and you're still hoping for it, get your head down, start thinking, because we want to win that argument and we didn't do it and we need to accept that.
Okay, thank you. Very brief comment, anyone? Ross? No.
I think, I do get where you're coming from. Where
Can I ask you just to be very brief, because I am bursting for the toilet.
Hey, you can run on, don't worry about it.
No, it's professional.
I'll chair Andy the thing, it'll be fine. Don't worry.
Will you, hell?
They won't even notice. I'm joking. Anyway, I do I get like the arguments or the TV things were a wee bit cringeworthy. I used to love the SNP ones where it was just like, I don't know, like kids playing in a park and a wind is blowing through Scotland. That's the thing. But yeah, I do. I think the fear mongering. I don't so much. I think you've got a right to spread fear. I think fear is a big motivator, and the No campaign did that well. It wasn't so much the fear that annoyed me; it was the outright lies.
Not everybody's going to agree with you on that point.
Well, they do. But I think some a lot of time better together. We're approaching private companies in order to say that, look, our position in Scotland will be endangered if there's a yes vote. My favourite one was Tesco, because Tesco released a statement saying, if there's a yes vote, we're going to make thousands of job cuts in a number of weeks. Tesco had already written up the plans to make thousands of job cuts, and in a couple of weeks' time, they rolled up thousands of job cuts because they were making the plan anyway, and it may as well suit their political outcome. The Bank of England was a great example of we've got no contingency plan. If Scotland votes yes, they had a complete contingency plan written up. So I do like spread fear all you like, but don't spread misinformation that you know is wrong.
Okay, so what I think we've taken from that is Tesco and the BBC are the evil corporations controlling everything.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad for clarification on that. Right, folks, that is nearly 9 o'clock, so I'm afraid we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being involved. This has been a really positive outcome for us. I hope that you've enjoyed it as well. I hope our panelists have gotten something out of it. Yeah, good, excellent. Well, we hope to have many more events like this, so please keep coming back. Please keep being involved. I don't know if Dom, our organizer, wants to say a few quick words.
Again, just want to think about it. I just want to reiterate what Andrew said. Thank you all for coming. There's free entry in a few minutes. Distorted, our Rock Night, Rock Without Compromise, who cheekily plugged this here the whole night. We've got free entry, so we're going to pop them around all the tables. If you want to hang out for a bit of rock and roll, rock on.
And a huge round of applause.